Welcome back for another super exciting writing lesson from Mr. Lassard. Of course, there was no sarcasm in my voice there. Writing is always exciting, and today the exciting thing that we're going to learn is how to take what we already know about CEEC, but this time bump it up from just talking about what belongs in a paragraph to what belongs in an essay, and how CEEC works with essays also. Before we start that, as always, I expect these notes to be in your Cornell notes section of your notebook, and I will want to see them when I check. So we have three objectives today. The first objective is for you to be able to understand how the basic elements of an informative paragraph translate up to an entire essay. So we know those basic elements are claim, evidence, elaborate, and conclude. Now we need to talk about how those go from being just part of a paragraph to being part of an entire essay. You should be able to apply your existing knowledge of CEEC in a larger and more complex way because essays are larger and more complex than paragraphs. And by the time we're done here, you should at least be able to be ready to give a first attempt at writing a well-structured essay using the format that I'm giving you. So if we start out just thinking that a paragraph requires claim, evidence, elaboration, and a conclusion, and we know also that essays require these same parts, but obviously they need to be expanded, like I said on the last slide. So if we think about writing a paper like growing a tree, which maybe is a little bit confusing at first, but bear with me here for a second. It might help you understand why we need these parts. So think of the claim as the paper's roots, as what grounds the paper and gives the paper purpose, right? Like the roots give a tree purpose. They allow the tree to grow from there, right? And a paper needs a claim for the same reason. It gives the paper purpose and allows the paper to grow from there. The evidence and the elaboration are similar to the paper's trunk and branches. The trunks and branches of trees grow from the roots, right? They grow in the direction that the roots give them. They also reach out into the world, especially those branches, are connecting the tree to the visible world. And in the same way, evidence and elaboration does kind of the same thing for a paper. And then finally, the conclusion is like the paper's leaves, where the conclusion makes it all pretty. The conclusion makes it all worthwhile. A lot of times when we look at trees, we look at them and they're pretty because we like the leaves and the flowers on them. And it's the same thing for a paper. The conclusion is going to wrap things up in a way that make it like, oh yeah, I understand why all of that is important. Let's start with the claim paragraph. Remember that the claim is like the roots. So a firm foundation upon which the rest of the paper rests does three things. And remember that claim is that foundation, right? The claim is the roots. And so the claim needs to do these three things in order for the rest of the paper to work. First, the claim paragraph needs to introduce the topic of your paper. And since you have a whole paragraph, you've got a sentence or a couple of sentences in which you can ease us into the topic of your own paper. It's not like a paragraph where it has to be in that first sentence. You've got a couple sentences to do it. The second thing that a claim paragraph needs to do is give necessary background on the topic. We've got to know what you're talking about, and we've got to know the essentials about your topic before we jump into it, because that's the point of an essay. And then finally, a claim is going to provide a thesis statement that will be expanded upon throughout the claim. So a thesis statement is just a fancier word for a claim, and the thesis statement, gives, just like a claim does in a paragraph, it gives the paper direction. It says, this is what we're going to cover, and this is what you will know by the end of the paper. All right, it's just that we need more time. Thesis statements are usually more complex than a simple paragraph claim. Moving on to evidence and elaboration paragraphs, and those are also called body paragraphs. So we've covered the introduction paragraph, the claim paragraph, and we move on to the body paragraphs. Remember that the body paragraphs provide that solid system of support that sprouts from the foundation, that sprouts from the claim and reaches out into the world. So the evidence in the elaboration paragraphs or the body paragraphs are really the parts that reach out for real-world applications. So each body paragraph should provide new evidence. We don't want to repeat evidence. We always want to be bringing in new evidence. And since you have multiple paragraphs to work with, you shouldn't provide too much evidence in any paragraph either. And then each new piece of evidence needs to be elaborated upon in order to prove the thesis statement. So you need to be able to say specifically, this piece of evidence helps prove this specific part of the thesis, and you've got a whole paragraph to do that now. The most important part, though, is probably that all body paragraphs follow CEEC format. So we think of them as the evidence and elaboration paragraphs, but within each body paragraph, you need to have its own little mini claim, and then obviously evidence and elaboration, because I covered that earlier, and then a connection to the next paragraph. So there are slight adjustments to the fact that we're looking at CEEC paragraphs. In this case, the claim is what we'll call the topic sentence, and it's related to a certain part of your thesis. Usually a thesis has different parts that need to be proved, and your claim for each body paragraph will be focused on proving a certain part of that. The evidence obviously is information supporting the paragraph's topic. The elaboration connects the evidence back to the thesis, and the connection transitions us into the next paragraph. So slight adjustments, but it's still the same basic format, right? Like the claim is telling us what we're going to cover in the paragraph. The evidence and the elaboration provide evidence obviously. Pardon the bell. Couldn't help it. Evidence and elaboration, we know what that does, and then the connection is what ties us to what's coming next. Finally, you want to end your essay with a conclusion paragraph. And remember, the conclusion paragraph is like the leaves of the tree, right? So it's the pretty part of the paper. And once you've done all the work to say, here's what I'm going to prove, and here's how I've proved it, and you've given me multiple paragraphs of proving it, the connection really, once and for all, connects, or the conclusion connects us, the audience, to the rest of the paper. It makes it relevant. It makes us care. It makes us think, that was nice, hopefully, if it does its job. So first thing you need to do in your conclusion paragraph is you need to remind the reader of the thesis, but you don't want to repeat the thesis because you've already proved it. You just want to remind them, here's what you learned throughout the entire paper. So without repeating, remind. And second, you need to connect the ideas from the paper to real life. And by real life, that means that the reader's life, not your life, the reader's life. So make the reader feel like the information that was in the paper is important to them as well.